Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is a beautiful, stunningly beautiful day here in Central Virginia, and we are a little bit uh, in shock about what's going on in our country right now. And so I have Sam Faddis here with me today, Spy Talk with Mary Grace and Sam, who actually is actually a spy. And he he has a lot of experience in the Middle East. And those of you who have watched my show frequently in the past are very familiar with Sam. He has helped us muddle through a lot of very technical issues having to do with legalities in this country, with spycraft, with what is going on with Middle Eastern policy with this so-called White House. And this is a day that I think is going to be very important to understand what's going on in our nation with regard to the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hezbollah, pro-Hamas. Uh, m- I won't call them protesters. I think they're operatives who are working in our cities. So we're gonna go right into this topic. For those of you who aren't familiar with what's been happening over the last 24 hours on the start of Passover, I'm going to let Sam fill you in. And so as you're coming in, everybody, just remember that we need for you to comment, let us know you're here, share this. It looks like our reach on Facebook and everywhere else is abysmal at this moment. And so I hope the streams are working. It's up to you to help us. Just hit the thumbs up, hit the likes, share, tag people, do what you need to do, leave a comment, and then hopefully it's going to register that we're live. Sam Faddis, welcome to the show. Good to see you. Give us a briefing on what's been happening, especially up in New York, but also going back several weeks with these so-called protests that are being stood up around our country.
Right. Well, right now, what we have are actions. You're right. Protest is not really the right word, because anything that sort of makes these things seem benign or spontaneous or is fundamentally wrong. Right. We have these actions that have been organized and are ongoing at a whole bunch of universities around the United States. I've lost track. I mean, I was up big chunks of the night last night watching live streams on various platforms from stuff going on. I mean, in New York City alone, NYU, Columbia,
Yeah.
out in California, a whole host of places, Yale, MIT. I mean, I have no idea by this point, dozens and dozens of universities, varying sizes, but some of these actions are very, very large. These are all groups that describe themselves as pro-Palestinian. I mean, look, you hit the nail on the head when you introduced the term organizer. I mean, at Columbia, for instance, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students who have camped out and basically occupied the university. NYU, they were overnight. I think the police in New York cleaned out NYU. They've moved in Columbia multiple times. I think the students have come back in and reoccupied. In that crowd, I'm sure there's a bunch of just dumb kids who don't really understand what the heck they're talking about and are mouthing verbiage and think they're on the right side of history. But even those folks are being used and are pawns in an effort that is absolutely organized by very well-established organizations. These are the same guys who back a week ago were blocking access to Chicago O'Hare and SeaTac Airport out in Seattle and closed the Golden Gate Bridge and closed the Brooklyn Bridge, yada, yada, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is an ongoing thing. It's not spontaneous and not sort of organic grassroots, just people got upset and decided to go do something. So one of the biggest groups is Students for Justice in Palestine, so-called, just as an example. And they have a affiliate, if you will, in New York, which is called Within Our Lifetime. Within Our Lifetime, by the way, is a reference to their demand that the state of Israel cease to exist within their lifetime. So championing the erasure of the Jewish people and the elimination of the state of Israel. Okay, SJP, Students for Justice for Palestine, has been around for a long time, and it's the outgrowth of other organizations. And these are with direct ties, not just ideological ties like they think the same, direct ties to a whole host of Islamic terrorist organizations. PFLPGC, which is the Palestine Front, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, excuse me, Hamas, on down the list. So while you got a certain number of dumb kids that are in the middle of this, what the broader movement is effectively, this is a front organization, a front movement for terrorist organizations. So these guys are out politically advocating for and pushing the cause of groups like Hamas. That ultimately, when we take away the pro-Palestine fig leaf, is what this is. These guys are advocating on behalf of Hamas. Okay, let's just be brutally honest about this. And I say this not just from the perspective of somebody who's paying attention recently, but somebody who spent a big chunk of his life working against these guys. Hamas is an organization that practices and preaches mass murder and mass rape. These are guys who will rape women to death, will detonate bombs, suicide vests in the middle of weddings. And I'm talking Muslim weddings, because the Muslims in question don't think like them, who slaughter innocent people on the streets of Israel. These are guys are covered in blood. They are as evil as you could possibly imagine. And right now in Joe Biden's
Oh, we're losing audio on you. We're losing audio on you, Sam. Hold on a second. Okay, say that again.
Am I still there?
Yeah, you're here. Okay.
Okay. So what we have are pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah, pro-Islamic terrorist organizations. These are front organizations for terrorist groups, and they're on our streets. So last night they were marching in strength through downtown Manhattan, through the streets of the heart of the biggest city in the United States of America, marching on behalf of individuals who slaughtered what? In excess of 1,200 Israelis back in October, and have killed many times that. That's where we are. We got terrorist front organizations, broad daylight on our streets in our major cities.
And meanwhile, we have the FBI focusing on what they are calling domestic terrorists. So let's define, let's take a minute to camp out on what the FBI is now defining as a domestic terrorist in America.
Yeah, so all kidding aside, I mean, at some point when you and I are having these conversations, the whole situation becomes so surreal, so ludicrous on some level, that I start laughing, not because there's anything funny, but because it's like, good Lord, I hear myself saying this. Is it possible that this is actually true? And of course, it is true. I mean, so you have mass movements, obviously extremely well organized and very large, advocating on behalf of and directly connected to Hamas, Hezbollah, etc., on our streets. Meanwhile, what's the FBI doing? The FBI is really upset about people who pray silently outside abortion clinics.
Yeah.
And really upset with Moms for Liberty because they have the audacity to say, we don't really think pornographic material should be in the elementary school library. They're really upset with the political opponents of the radical regime in Washington, D.C. So what's the definition of a domestic violent extremist? Really, at this point, it's anybody who pushes what they define in DC as misinformation or disinformation. So you don't, and this is not me pushing the envelope or trying to, and if you actually read their definitions, you don't have to commit a violent action. You don't have to blow anything up. If you are pushing what they call misinformation or disinformation, then you are by their definition encouraging violence, and therefore you're as bad as somebody who's detonating a suicide device. So misinformation and disinformation, obviously everybody who's watching this understands. Misinformation or disinformation is whatever the revolutionaries in Washington, D.C. disagree with. So, for instance, as an example, expressly, if you are raising questions about the integrity of our electoral process, which, by the way, overwhelmingly across the board, Democrats and Republicans, nobody trusts the electoral process anymore. All polling shows. But if you're raising those questions, by definition, you're spreading disinformation and misinformation. You're a threat to the Republic. And yeah, the FBI's got lots of time for you, but they don't have time for groups that are paralyzing the heart of our largest cities and advocating on behalf of Hamas. And just to be clear, I end up watching a lot of videos shot by lots of folks and of what's actually happening on the street and listening to the chants. These groups in these cities are expressly calling for jihad. They are expressly calling for an intifada in the United States, which means violence and revolution and bloodshed. They are attacking not just Israel, but attacking us. We are the great Satan. We must be destroyed. I mean, they're ambiguous. They're not holding hands and singing kumbaya and say, why can't we all get along? These guys are expressly in support of terrorist organizations. And back to your point again, when you watch the videos of these places, which I don't recommend, find something better to do with your life, if you're watching it, because it'll eat your soul. But the thing is, there are always very well organized, very well trained individuals. There's always somebody at the heart of this leading the chant, getting everybody in line, people showing up with banners, not banners they made on a bed sheet back, with some spray paint or something and a magic marker. Very organized, very slick, if you will, folks that show up. They know exactly what they're doing. They're directly connected to terrorist organizations. So,
and well-funded.
And obviously well-funded. And one of the implications is, not surprisingly, anybody with any common sense will understand, if you can simultaneously organize events like this nationwide, turn thousands of people out, shut down airports, close bridges, you know what else you can start doing? Detonating bombs, shooting people, burning things to the ground. And you would think the FBI would want to rip that structure out before we cross that bridge, but no indication that's happening.
Yeah. Well, what we always hear from the FBI is, well, we had them on our radar, and then buildings come down, and embassies get attacked, and ambassadors get killed. And so this is sadly what we are dealing with here. And it is, it's hard to open, a Tuesday morning with this type of content, but I think that people need to understand the seriousness of what's happening in our country right now. And also it seems like we have gone back 50, 100 years on a number of fronts in terms of civil rights in this country. We have the Jews being excoriated and physically attacked and singled out for being Jewish in America right now, on college campuses and in other places. We have women's rights being put back 50, 60 years in all aspects, with what's being done to Title IX, with what's being done in the sports segment. We have racism, blatant, in-your-face racism being perpetrated all over the country in businesses and colleges with these DEI policies. Now, the Supreme Court actually came out with a ruling over the weekend that those policies cannot be enforced against employees. And it's interesting because I have a family member who works at a very prestigious university on the East Coast, and they have mandatory DEI training that they're supposed to check off. And she told me that it's been sitting on her computer for 2 years now. She refuses to do it. And anyway, I sent her the information about what happened with the Supreme Court. And I said, well, actually, if they try to enforce this, it's against the law. She said, I think that's why they haven't actually come at me and other people who haven't done it. But the fact is, these universities have whole entire departments dedicated to pushing abject racism within their hiring practices, within their recruitment practices, within their admissions practices. And this is, like I said, our country it's going backwards. And I want to speak to this from the perspective of the slogan, Make America Great Again, because people have been gaslit into believing that when Trump or anybody says that it's a call for going back to the pre-civil rights era of oppression in this country. And what I want to present to you and to point out is that it's actually the opposite, that everything that President Trump is advocating and people who are like him and who support him are advocating exactly the opposite. And the people who are in power now are taking us back to a time when civil rights was literally just a dream. They're stripping and trying to strip all people of civil rights and also divide the people. And so when President Trump talks about making America great again, he's talking about business opportunity, income opportunity, equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, and just having the quality of institutions and ideas that this country was built on. It wasn't perfect, but we certainly don't need to be in a position of cutting the country off at the knees, which is what we see happening right now, destroying entire institutions and undermining the very fabric of what makes us a nation. And President Trump said it best when they started pushing to take down Confederate statues. He said, "This is only the start. They will come for our founding fathers." And we've already seen that happening. And we talked about that recently, even with the attempt to remove the William Penn statue from Philadelphia. And so I think that it's important for people to understand the gravity of what's happening right now in our country. And on the other side of that is, if Christians aren't awake yet, I don't know what it's going to take to wake them up. Because this is a spiritual battle. It's a battle for the soul of our nation. And I don't say that lightly. It's not a cliche. It really is time for people to understand and to get involved and to get on your knees and understand what's at stake here. We have radical communist, Marxist Islamists, Marxo-Islamists, whatever you call it, marching in the streets. The New York Post is currently reporting, 17 campuses where these demonstrations, we'll call them demonstrations, are taking place. And an additional, how many more? Additional protests, I'm going to call them demonstrations, have been announced for the week of April 22nd at more than a dozen additional colleges and counting. So Praying Medic is posting this on X, and he's quoting the New York Post. And so this is intense, guys. If you have children at these universities, it's time to have a conversation with them and maybe even get them home. I wouldn't want any child of mine mixed up in this. It's dangerous.
Yeah, as with so many things that you and I end up talking about,
Yeah.
it's just time for some plain talk. I mean, let's just speak some truth. Enough with dancing around issues. What you're talking about, just I mean, with these actions, I'll stick with that word, which is just one piece of the much bigger problem we're dealing with in this country. There's no ambiguity here. Again, I mean, maybe you're a dumb 19-year-old and you don't really understand what's happening, so you're holding a sign and chanting some stuff. But the broader context, the people that are organizing this, the people, their objectives, this is just evil.
Yeah.
Okay, as I've said to you before, I worked all over the Middle East for a really long time undercover. Counter-terrorist operations, been in some very different, I mean, some difficult places. A lot of that time, it's me and 2 or 3 other guys from the United States. And everybody else we're working with on our side in most of those countries was probably a Muslim. And most of the guys that were dying on our side fighting this sickness, this jihadism, this Islamic radicalism, were guys who were trying to save their religion from pure evil, from sickness, from suicide bombing, from the use of rape as a weapon of war, from guys that they regarded as barbarians trying to drag the world back into like the 6th century or something. Okay, if you're standing around on Columbia campus and you're in solidarity with Hamas, what you're saying is, stop with the freedom fighter crap. That's not who these guys are. These are guys who murder people on buses, stab children, blow up churches. These are guys who rape women to death. These are guys who do the most horrifying things you can imagine, and actually things that no normal person could imagine. And I've spent a lot of time, unfortunately, around these guys and hopefully getting rid of a number of these guys in one way or the other. That's what you're talking about. And it's right now in the heart of our biggest cities. You have people marching on behalf of Hamas that just killed, just most recently, and this is hardly their first outing, killed in excess of 1,200 Israeli citizens, walked into a music festival with AK-47s and gunned down young girls and boys dancing and listening to music. By the way, that music festival, the theme was peace and understanding. And these psychopaths, these animals, are machine gunning these people to death. Oh, by the way, then dragging the dead bodies back into Gaza, where they drive up and down the street in pickup trucks, showing off the bodies like they just killed a deer. And everybody in the streets is cheering for them. That's okay. That's what when you're out there on Columbia campus now, you're closing the Golden Gate Bridge or you're closing the Brooklyn Bridge. That's what you're saying. So back to your point about evil going back in history. Good God, you can kill them, slaughter them, display their bodies. Why? Because they're Jews and they deserve to die.
Yeah.
And you can talk about women's rights. Raping, mutilating, abusing, torturing women is okay because why? Because they're not covered, because they're not abiding by your religious principles. This is the pit of hell, man. I mean, that's what these people stand for. And again, if you have been, as I have been and a number of other people have been, face to face with these folks for a long time, you don't have any illusions. They're not freedom fighters. This is as evil as it gets. And the FBI doesn't have time to do anything about it. The guy who claims he's our president has apparently no interest in any of this. I mean, we're allowing this to happen.
Yes. And I think that it really is critical for people to understand that it's not a grassroots movement. This is not an organic
No.
type of protest that's springing up on college campuses. It is eerily similar to what we saw in the summer of 2020. They
Yes.
used the death of George Floyd to spawn
Yes.
these demonstrations all over the country, to the point where you had Antifa attacking federal buildings, federal courthouses, attempting to scale the White House fence. As far as I know, I don't think any of those people are in jail or serving
No.
time. There may be one or two who have been rolled up and prosecuted, but it's concerning. Another word for what's going on is a color revolution, and maybe you could speak to that, because that's something that the CIA has actually done in other countries. And it's something that General Flynn has talked about on the show, but we really do have to be aware that this is not organic. This is not in any way, shape, or form just a loose contingent of disgruntled college students who think that their voices need to be heard. Yes, there are innocents among them who are being used to push this agenda, but the people organizing this, it reminds me also of the Women's March. One thing that people don't understand about the Women's March to this day is that one of the main sponsors of the Women's March was CAIR, CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, who happen to be against abortion. And so it begs the question, how is an Islamic organization partnering with an organization and a movement that is very much in favor of murdering children and aborting children? I understand why they did it, but it's people need to learn how to follow the thread to who is actually pulling the strings in these types of movements. And so, can you talk a little bit about color revolution for our listeners so that they can understand what's behind this? This is another phase of the color revolution that began in the summer of 2020. I would say actually it began in 2016 and during the inauguration of President Trump, but it's becoming more obvious to people now.
Well, I suppose, I mean, the term color revolution, comes from the specific reference to color is the fact that there's usually some color that's becomes the symbol of the revolution. That's where that term comes from. But more
Okay.
generally, what you're talking about is you're talking about something that is thematic or built around a cause, and it has the express purpose of overturning the existing social, political, economic order. That, I think, is the heart of what people need to understand here. It's not just that these protests, demonstrations, actions, whatever we want to call them, are coordinated and sponsored and financed, which is all true, but they're not happening in a vacuum, and they are not discrete or separate from everything that's happening around them. One of the things that really troubles me all day, every day, is the extent to which these revolutionaries, and they are revolutionaries, have already seized control of much of the United States government. You were talking before about DEI, okay? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this whole woke agenda and all this stuff. Okay. Well, I think a lot of people, when they're conservatives, they hear this and they're just kind of like, okay, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. Who cares? Okay. You don't understand. These guys are in control of the apparatus. Not just they're embedded in it, they are in control. So every agency in the federal government now has a DEI coordinator or whatever title they give them, basically a commissar. That person doesn't just pump out silly little memos and people just ignore them and, yeah, whatever he's talking to me about, I got to identify my pronouns. Who cares? I'm getting back to my job. You can't just get back to your job, because these things are no longer optional, is what that means. You are required to adhere to the dogma. You are required to use the language, and you are required to behave in accordance with their principles. If you do not, you will be fired. If you do not, you will not be promoted. You will not be moved into leadership. This applies to CIA as an example. There is such a commissar in CIA who prescribes all of these things. So if you don't toe the line, if you don't spout the revolutionary rhetoric, if you don't behave the way they tell you to behave, you will not be promoted. You will not be assigned a leadership position. You will be removed from a managerial position. So the chief of station in Islamabad, the head of the CIA office in Islamabad, just to use a notional example, is not going to be the guy or gal who knows how to run ops and bust terrorist organizations and protect Americans from nuclear weapons. The guy or gal who's in charge in Islamabad is going to be whoever did all of these revolutionary things, said the right things. So again, I mean, maybe you can ignore it for a little while until they fire you, but real fast, the organization does what it's told. And so the revolutionaries are already in charge. You talk about protests and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, and why aren't we pushing back on this? Well, many of the most critical positions in our government are now filled with folks who are Hamas supporters, who are supporters of Iran, who not literally. So the guy who's the head intel guy in the National Security Council is a guy with a long history of sympathy to Iran, support for Palestinian terrorist groups.
I was just going to ask you that.
That's the guy making our policy on these issues.
His name, Mayor Bitar. How do you pronounce it?
Mayor Bitar, yeah.
Yeah, Maher. So this is on the most recent article that Sam has put out on his magazine. It's And Magazine, AND magazine.substack.com. Please go and read this to understand what's going on. And it's so National Security Council, this is where the presidential daily briefings are assembled, and the information that's coming in to the White House is being funneled through people like this who are sympathizers of Hamas. And so this is how policy is driven from these people. It's not Biden unilaterally acting on a whim or whatever. And one of the things that I think is important in your article is that the media and a lot of the pundits, especially on the right, are talking about the incompetence and the mistakes and the lack of direction and the things like that. And you have a different take on this. You don't believe that it's incompetence at all. So tell us about that. Give us an idea of what's really happening.
Yeah, look, this is, I think that's a superb question, because it brings, now that I'm done with my world tour of tried to spew 5 hours worth of information out in 10 minutes, as I always do.
It's so valuable.
You're bringing us back to the heart of the matter, because look, this is not weak-kneed. This is not feckless. This is not, these guys just don't have the backbone to stand up to Iran. That would be really good news, people, if that were true. If we were only dealing with the most incompetent administration in American history, at some level, we could breathe a sigh of relief. That's not what's happened. The enemies of America have taken over. This guy Bitar that you're referencing is the special assistant, or whatever he is, the senior intel guy in the National Security Council. Okay, sitting in the White House. Well, he effectively drives all of the policy and the actions of the intelligence community, and by the way, sees everything and anything he wants to see. This guy is a terrorist supporter. We're the bad guys in his movie. We're not wearing the white hats. We're wearing the black hats. And this administration is filled with these people. And I don't mean like they're little grunts down in a cubicle somewhere, walking the mail around. I mean, all across the administration, in the most senior positions, you got these folks. So when they're looking at Israel and Iran, they don't think the Iran is the enemy. And obviously, I'm not talking about the Iranian people, but I'm talking about the Ayatollahs and that psycho regime. No, they think basically that we're the problem. Our own government thinks that we and the Israelis are the problem. Right now, this administration is getting ready to impose sanctions on the Israeli Defense Forces. Let me say that again. We're not enforcing the sanctions on the Iranians, so we're letting them sell oil. And they've made, I think in the last 12 months, something like $30 billion from selling oil in violation of sanctions we're supposed to be enforcing. But we're getting ready to sanction the Israeli Defense Forces for basically being too mean to Hamas. I also can tell you from talking to people inside the administration, we are now slow rolling every request the Israelis send. So obviously our military provides tremendous support to the Israelis. So they're hitting us up all day, every day. We need spare parts, we need ammunition, we need this, we need that. Used to be that those requests were fulfilled expeditiously. This is a critical ally. Now, at a minimum, we're kind of shoving them to the bottom of the pile of paperwork. Yeah, we'll get to that eventually. All across the government sending this signal. We're not really with you there. What did we say after the Iranians fired 300 missiles at Israel? We said, the first thing we said was, we don't want the Israelis to retaliate. We won't help them if they do. We don't support them defending themselves.
Right.
My God, are you kidding me?
Yeah, and there seems to be a lot of contention right now over our support for Israel. And this is something that has come up from time to time, but it seems more pronounced now. And one of the things that, I mean, it's complicated. The history of the Middle East, the history of Israel, Jerusalem, Palestine, all of it going back way before the Balfour Declaration. But it is safe to say that Israel has a deep state, and that there are things that are being done through that government, just like in this country, that are being done for very dark and nefarious purposes. But the fact remains that that is the only democratically run nation in that piece of sand in the middle of that part of the world. And so I think that when it comes to making a declaration as a nation that you are going to walk away from and abandon that government and that ally, that cannot be overlooked, regardless of how each person feels individually about, people, less than honorable people or entities that are embedded within the structure of the government. To me, it's kind of like a parallel of what's happening with the United States, that there's a lot of bad people in the United States, but to say that the United States should no longer exist because of that, because of the deep state, that America should just go down in flames and be left to its own devices, I don't think people understand the gravity of a statement or a sentiment like that. It's not that simple. It's not that cut and dry, I don't think. And again, it is complicated, but I tend not to jump in with this argument that Israel is also the bad guy here. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm processing a little bit too. I don't have a definitive answer on this, but it's bigger and more complex than most people will ever really grasp. But the fact is, there is a battle of evil versus good. We do know that. And that's right out of the Bible. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. And so that's what we're seeing right now, that a lot of these cataclysmic events are playing out over this nation, over Israel, over the Middle East. I am not of the opinion that we're in the end times. But I am of the opinion that there are many things that could happen to the detriment of this country and Israel, and that the prayers of the people have the ability to sway the outcome. I do believe that firmly, and that's biblical. We've seen that throughout history, that we get a glimpse of what's possible, and then we pray that for a different outcome, and really contend, not just, oh God, whatever you want. The prayers of the saints, the prayers of the patriarchs have swayed God and have swayed the outcome of entire battles and the course of history.
Well, look,
So,
I'm an America First guy, right?
yeah.
And I'm not going to endorse every decision that the Israelis have made, or somehow every Israeli politician. And in my dealings with the Israelis abroad, working very closely with them, I can guarantee you that we've had some very, very direct and frank conversations. I think come out of that on both sides with respect for each other, but basically like, no, I don't think it's, I don't agree with your policy, Tel Aviv, and I'm not endorsing it. Okay. But this is not, as I think you're referencing, this is not about that, right? This isn't about, are you a big fan of Netanyahu's or not, or what politically is going on. This is about the existence of the state of Israel, and actually genocide, in the sense that that's what Hamas wants. Hamas and Hezbollah and the Ayatollahs in Tehran are not asking for a two-state solution. They're not asking for better treatment of the Palestinians. They are advocating, and you don't have to guess, just listen to them. They say it about every 5 minutes, to wipe the slate clean, to eliminate the state of Israel. And that means killing all of the Jews, from when they say from the river to the sea, from the Jordan to the Med. They want it all, and they're not asking to buy plane tickets for people to fly somewhere or come up with an alternate resolution. Their answer is to slaughter and eliminate the entire population of Israel. That is expressly what these groups are dedicated to. And if they actually had the military capacity to do that tomorrow, they would launch that attack tomorrow. So I don't know, if you're wandering around Columbia University campus and you think you're part of an action that's all about being touchy-feely and let's love one another and get along, that ain't Hamas, man. That's not Hezbollah. They are about genocide. They are dedicated to genocide.
And the ultimate irony of this is when you see these demonstrations and you see people waving LGBTQ flags right alongside the Palestinian flags, who's going to tell them?
Yeah, you would last like 15 seconds. You're the first group that's going to be slaughtered, and from their standpoint, from the other side's standpoint, ideally slaughtered in particularly horrific ways, like being thrown from tall buildings or stoned to death in public. And anytime I see some passionate young woman on camera at NYU or wherever, she's all fired up for the cause, and she's standing there, dressed in a normal Western fashion and speaking publicly and advocating for Hamas and Hezbollah. And I'm thinking, in their world that they're trying to create, you don't get to speak at all. You don't get to show your face at all.
Much less your body.
Shut the hell up and go home and do whatever your eldest male relative or your husband tells you to. And if you don't, then we execute you and kill you expressly. So my God, I'm looking at this, somebody who's 21 years old, and you have no idea. You are preaching on behalf of people who would slaughter you and abuse you and feel good about it when they were done.
Intense topic today, and
we got really heavy really fast, didn't we?
I know. It's just,
we needed like a Homer moment or something.
I know. And but again, sometimes we have to have these conversations because people are so easily distracted, and people are getting their focus on things that really aren't important right now. But I think the bigger picture of what's happening, we didn't even talk about the legal cases that they're trying to win against Trump and
Mhm.
how ridiculous all of that is. And your background as an attorney obviously comes into play with that. I let your secret out. And it obviously comes into play. And I think that we need to pick up this conversation on another broadcast. But one thing that I would really urge our listeners to do is to pray. And also, I really want to stress this. If you have family members in those areas, children especially who are in school, just have a serious conversation with them. This is literally not the hill to die on. And the people who are organizing these demonstrations do not care about your child, your niece, your nephew, your adult child. They don't care. They are not coming to help them. They're not coming to save them when things turn violent, and they already have turned violent. And they're not coming to bail them out if they end up in jail or in the hospital. That's not happening. They're being used as pawns in a much, much bigger game that has a very sinister end. And it's like the Red Guard. Um, Mao had no allegiance to the people that same age who overturned an entire nation out of loyalty to him. None. He sent them to work camps. He had a lot of them executed. So please just be aware of that and know your history and know how to discern the times and understand what is going on. And pray for the safety of everybody in harm's way in these places. Cities like New York, it's so difficult because of their bail laws right now, because of their policies. I mean, I jokingly said last night that the people who were being arrested, they did arrest some people. I said they'll be out before midnight with no bail,
Mhm.
and they won't be prosecuted because they're not waving American flags. And that's the sad truth of what's happening right now in our nation. So please, please be aware of this. It's a really unstable, insecure situation for your college age child. And I would just say at any institution, because you don't know where these demonstrations are going to pop up. And it's so easy to get swept up in what's happening because of the emotion. And that's why they do it at that level, is because it's very easy to prey on emotion, like you're saying, a impressionable 19-year-old girl who has compassion. If they're showing photos and videos of
Right.
poor Palestinians who are being so supposedly brutalized by
Mhm.
the IDF, then of course they're going to have compassion, and
Right.
that's how they get pulled into this type of fight. It's like kids that convert to veganism. Like one picture of a little chick that died, and that's it. They're over, and so they they play
That would never
on
work on me, by the way.
they
That's
play on the emotion. That's what I'm trying to say.
mm,
So we really do. We need to be in prayer and understand that God is bigger than all of this. But He needs your participation and your understanding and your willingness to stand against it, and not to avoid speaking up just because you're afraid of what people are going to think. It's important that people understand. Sam, how can people find your content and you?
well, the easiest way to find me is to go to And Magazine, and it'll take you everywhere else. So andmagazine.substack.com. I'm on Twitter, I think, still
Yeah.
as Real Sam Faddis, and on Getter and Truth Social, but And Magazine will take you there. Just go to andmagazine.substack.com.
Yes. And those of you who are uh, supporters of War Room of Bannon, you see you see Sam on there. You see and hear his voice on Frank Gaffney's show. Sam is very gracious to honor us with his time because he's actually working in a very big sphere. And so we're honored to have you here to give us your opinion
I got
and your
one. I got one
expertise.
more. I got one more shameless plug to put in. If you give me,
Please, yeah.
It's not for me. This is for my daughter.
Oh, yeah.
Who is now writing for Breitbart.
Okay.
Her married name is Weibel,
Okay.
Weibel, Elizabeth
Nice.
Weibel, and she was up all night too, banging out articles following all of these actions we've just been talking about.
Nice.
So she's
Congratulations.
fired up and she's doing a great job with them.
Excellent. Elizabeth Weibel. You must be really proud. The family is carrying on the legacy. So this is fantastic. I mean, you guys are retired. I just want to point this out, that Sam
Allegedly.
and Mrs. Sam are
Yeah.
retired. And
she's in the other room right now posting articles and doing research. So clearly we failed retirement. We don't really know how it's supposed to work.
And you keep adding animals, and
keep
it's
adding
like
it.
you're
Keep adding animals. I haven't seen any bears yet this year on the mountain. They haven't showed up and
okay.
stolen my bird feeders yet, but it's only a matter of time.
Right. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting. I haven't been up to your place, but I hope to make it up there.
We got to get you up here with some other folks, and we'll have an
think
event.
That would be great.
We love it. We love it on the mountain, and but between all the animals inside and outside keeps us busy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, and I would love to do that. Love to connect with Gina again, and maybe I'll make a little road trip. So thank you again. We're going to play us out here with a little commercial. And so everybody, please stick around, keep your volume up. And as always, remember to support the America First companies that help us to keep this content on air. If you go to my website, marygracemedia.com, and you join the mailing list, you won't miss any content. But you can also go there and shop. You can support great companies like MyPillow. You can support our gold and silver suppliers, anybody that is thinking about what to do with your money, your retirement, and things like that. You want to check them out. We've got our amazing freeze-dried beef at griddowntowdown.com. So I'm going to tell you more about that in the commercial, but just scroll through the website, because there's more on the website that's not even in my commercial, including our wellness store. I always forget to talk about that, and apparently I forgot again today. So so here we go, and everybody have a great day. We've got more great content coming up with you this week, and we also have an interview that went up on Saturday with Praying Medic. In case you missed it, it was tremendous as usual. We had a good 2-hour conversation about everything from aliens to end times to current events and everything in between. So please go back and catch that on all of my channels. And again, thank you everybody for supporting. Thank you for my moderators. Thank you, Christy, for being in the chat on both Rumble and YouTube. And we're off. So we will see you guys back here on the channel very soon. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And thank you for tuning in. To mypillow.com, use promo code Mary Grace, and buy everything you need for the home. There's no need to spend time shopping anywhere else. Go to mypillow.com, use promo code Mary Grace, get your towels, pillows, sheets, robes, dog beds, pet beds, cat beds, whatever it is that you want for the home. Go to mypillow.com, promo code Mary Grace. It's easy. Don't waste your time anywhere else. mypillow.com, promo code Mary Grace. Thank you. Listen, your health is your best investment. We have a country to save, and we need people who are in the best shape of their lives, physically, mentally, spiritually. Why not connect with a team who cares about you on every single level from the inside out? Official Synapse is that team. Officialsynapse.com. It's official, synapse.com. Tell them Mary Grace sent you, and they will treat you like family. If you're like most people, you really probably haven't thought about transferring your paper dollars into physical gold and silver. But I want to tell you a story. My friend Andrew Sorcini over at Beverly Hills Precious Metals, he recently went overseas and he wanted to buy a watch. He likes fine watches. He took 3 currencies with him. He took gold, he took Bitcoin, and he took American dollars. Now, there used to be a time when the American dollar was king. I remember that when I used to travel overseas. Everybody wanted dollars. The people that he was dealing with would not take his dollars because the dollar is so devalued around the world. They wanted the gold. So this is what I recommend to you. I want you to think about this. If you have cash in the bank, if you have an investment account that you have worked hard for years to accumulate, consider the value of converting that money into physical gold and silver. You're not buying something that's losing value. You're changing those worthless dollars into a tangible physical asset that will go up in value, which it has done historically. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to bh-pm.com. The first thing you're going to do is schedule that free consultation. Second thing, just think rationally about this, pray about it, go to the Lord, see what the best decision for you and your family is. I can't tell you that. I don't want to pressure you into that. What I do know is don't be scared, be prepared. And so the third thing you want to do is make a decision for you and your family. Make a decision, take action. bh-pm.com. Let them know Mary Grace sent you. When it comes to food, we really want to be aware of what is in the food that we're consuming. And that includes different types of technologies, jibber jabbers, technology that can alter your genetic makeup. And this is why we want to focus on American grown beef that isn't injected with things that you wouldn't put into your own body. We really don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We saw 4 years ago what happened when the whole country shut down and people couldn't even go to the grocery store. We saw what happened when meat and other foods were rationed, and that could happen any day. We want you to be prepared. We want you to take action. And one of the best ways to do that is to secure food for yourself and your family. What better way than to go to griddownchowdown.com, use promo code Mary Grace, get a sustainable, reliable, shelf-stable source of high-quality American beef. All you do is go to griddownchowdown.com, tell them Mary Grace sent you, put your order in the basket and check out, and you're good to go. The other thing you can do is you can get a subscription. If you do a subscription, you're going to get this freeze-dried beef delivered to your door every month. And you're going to save a little bit while you do that. You're going to stockpile it, or you can just cook with it. Some people are just using it for their regular cooking. It's really up to you, but it's super convenient because it's freeze-dried and it's shelf-stable for 12, 15 years or more. I just want to give a shout out to everybody who watches this show. Thank you for being a participant. Thank you for being a loyal audience member. I just want to remind you, if you like what you've seen, please share this and don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications, and also sign up for my email list so you never miss a show.